took the bullhorn and stood alongside some of the rescue workers and basically did the one thing he has always been undeniably good at, which is cheerleading. He was a cheerleader at Phillips Andover, actually, and very good at it. But this is the culture of TV, where the press really only cares about and only responds to televisual performance. And at a moment where everybody wanted a big daddy, Bush did well enough to allow the press to marvel at his aplomb, at his stature, and it became a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy.
If I had a little window into the average American household, like 5 minutes on their TV screen at night, to tell them how to decode the kind of propaganda they're going to see from President Bush about security, I think, I would say, first of all, don't just look at the images. Don't just look at Bush landing on the aircraft carrier, Bush surrounding himself with our troops.
Hooah! Semper Fi.
They want him to look tough. They want him to look strong. In fact, even on Earth Day, the image they chose was him with an axe in his hand, clearing trails in the Adirondacks. So, his administration is so dripping with testosterone that even to celebrate Earth Day, the guy's got to have a weapon in his hand.
They lose no opportunity to take pictures of Bush on the ranch, outdoors, not sitting at a desk, wearing, reading glasses and having, intellectual conversations, but out walking, clearing brush, sitting on the back of a pickup truck. Those images are plentiful, and that's not an accident. That's how they've understood Bush's popularity, is he is the rugged individualist. He is the cowboy.
The Republicans have ingeniously, created this sense that this is about real men. It's time for real men to step to the plate. Now, enough of this namby-pamby, because George W. represents the reborn American male.
Bush's propagandists have been masterful at crafting a certain image for him, actually based to some extent on his weaknesses. He's not a guy who was born in Connecticut and was a legacy admission to Phillips Andover and Yale. He's not a guy who has the Queen of England as a cousin. He's not a guy from a fabulously wealthy family. None of that is the case. He's just Will Rogers. He's just a regular guy, and when he messes up the language, it proves he's just like you and me.
I understand the emotionality of the death penalty.
U.S. Daily's story about subliminal messages. Reduced power plant emissions. First time we may be completely certain he has nuclear weapons. Some accuse us both of not being able to speak the language.
That's quite brilliant, is to make Bush out to be a kind of Jacksonian figure, a kind of natural leader from the wilds,
President Bush and his colleagues talk about a certain America to defend their policies. They think America still is back in the 19th century, where the tough guys can take out one another in an open combat, man against man, high noon on Main Street with Gary Cooper, being played by President Bush.
I want justice. And there's an old poster out west, as I recall, that said, "Wanted, dead or alive."
He's not Gary Cooper. He's a coward who bushwhacked the American people by exploiting the fear and ignorance engendered in the post-9/11 environment to portray Iraq as a threat to our national security, weapons of mass destruction that would destroy the very society that we live in. The need, therefore, for frontier justice to prevent mushroom clouds from popping up all over American cities. He lied to us. He bushwhacked us.
You think of past elections, Michael Dukakis, you think of him riding around in the tank looking like Snoopy, you think of the Willie Horton ad against him. You don't really think of substantive things because our elections rarely turn anymore on substantive issues. But this is one that really needs to be decided on the substance because our country faces real threats. But these guys are not going after the right threats. They are pursuing a pre-existing agenda under the guise of fighting terrorism that is going to bankrupt our country, that is going to put our troops at risk, and that is going to make the terrorist threat to us grow over time instead of diminish.
In the immediate aftermath of September 11th, The people of the United States came together in an unprecedented display of national unity, and the world rallied to their cause. Across the globe, people came together in a spontaneous and stunning display of unified support for the people of the United States. Yet just 2 years later, in those same places and on those same streets, tens of millions of people would come together again, this time to march in outrage over the Bush administration's decision to invade Iraq. How the American people interpret the meaning and importance of this dramatic and sudden shift is a question that has yet to be answered.
One of the things that the exercise of power does is that it cuts both ways. So the US exercises power in the world to create stability. People who are on the receiving end of that power, right, see themselves being oppressed. And so they resist. And as a consequence, this process of trying to pacify the world and get it to go along with what the United States wants actually creates the resistance that the US is trying to quell. And so this is not the way that will actually get us forward out of the situation that we find ourselves in. It only makes things worse.
I would say that the war against Iraq not only is not part of the war against terror, meaning against Al-Qaeda or against terrorist networks, but it virtually gives up the war on terror. It substitutes for it and suppresses it, in the sense that I think it's impossible to think of reducing the threat from Osama bin Laden and from Al-Qaeda so long as we are occupying Iraq and killing Muslims in Iraq.
Well, I look at this from the point of view of a mother. I have 2 children. I want my children to live in a safe world. I don't want any more September 11th to happen. And I look at what this government has done post-September 11th, and I think not much more you could have done to make us less safe.
Why do people in the U.S. think that if we have bigger weapons and more weapons, it's going to make us safe from terrorists? We have the most advanced military in the world. We have the most sophisticated weapons in the world. We have more nuclear weapons than anybody in the world. Did that stop September 11th? It didn't stop it.
I think it's really important that we begin to redefine national security. If people don't have jobs, if people can't provide education for their children, if people are going hungry, if people don't have health insurance, they're insecure. We need to be able to address that level of insecurity in this country. And the federal government is not addressing those needs because we're pouring all this money into a unilateral war and providing tax breaks for very wealthy people.
We have a set of religious beliefs here that to the extent that we must support the wealthy, the rich, that the rich are in terrible trouble, that if we don't take care of the rich, everything terrible will happen. Well, my feeling is the rich can always take care of themselves. That's why they're rich. They have a wonderful skill for making money. They don't need our government help. They need to be impeded by the government. It'll bring out the best in them. At the same time, it'll level the playing field a little bit.
So I think what it really comes down to is, are the American voters going to sit still for this? Are we going to treat our democracy like some sort of spectator sport, like watching the Super Bowl? Or are we going to ask a little more of ourselves this time? Are we going to explore these claims? Are we going to look at the details of what this administration has actually done?
Good societies have cultivated fearlessness and hope among their citizens. Good politics has always been about real courage, real fearlessness. Take Gandhi, whose ultimate weapon was fearlessness against one of the worst empires of our times. And